Today I'm here with Scott Newgent. Scott is an activist and a writer and is currently advocating to stop the medical transitioning of children. Now, Scott, you recently had an article come out in Newsweek. So this is like a mainstream publication about your experience with transitioning. So can we just jump right in? Tell us like a little bit about, the process of writing that article. Maybe what was the reaction that you got to it?
The reaction is overwhelmingly positive from all different angles. It took me about 2 years, thousands of emails, phone calls, to get published in some kind of mainstream media. And I don't mean just me and anything that doesn't go directly with the trans radical activism. So it was really, really hard. After I found out that I was going to be in the in Newsweek, it almost felt like, this weight had been lifted off, that I had, made this kind of promise that I was going to get this out there. And after I got that phone call, I just kind of, sobbed for a little bit, and, happy that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it's good to see because especially here in the US, there's been sort of this media silence around this issue. It seems like people are scared to touch it. Do you think that Newsweek taking your article signals maybe a shift, or is it sort of a one-off?
Well, I certainly hope so, because here's the truth. What is happening to kids right now, what they're doing, the pharmaceutical companies and the activists are doing to children, is not a long-term plan. There's no way in hell this will continue. This will stop. It's just how long is it going to be before it stops, and how many kids are mutilated in the process. So for me, it's the faster the better. And we have a portion of society, and I was talking to a friend about this the other day. We have a portion of society that really doesn't blossom until they are adults. They don't fit in kindergarten. They don't fit in first grade, second grade. Middle school's like horrible. High school's horrible. You've got Johnny Quarterback that, boys sit back and go, I want to be that. And you've got, Angie Pom Pom. And you think their lives are going to just be wonderful. And I don't fit anywhere. And then they grow up, and those are the kids that become the doctors, the lawyers, the writers, the movers and shakers, because they've had to deal with some kind of hardship. They've had to deal with not fitting in. Their empathy level is higher. They are more focused on learning. They're more focused on emotions. And we're taking those kids that would accomplish something in adulthood, and we're telling them that you don't have to feel awkward like this. If you feel awkward like this, then you are probably trans. And you know what? Let's get you on all this medication. So we jump over this time period, which all these influential people are not going to have experienced what they needed to experience to do everything that they need in the world. And it has to stop. There's no way that this can be sustained. None.
So to go back a little bit, how did you come to this topic? Tell us a bit about, what brought you to this position and this passion for this issue.
Here's the truth that what society doesn't know is most transgender people are working next to them at school or at work, or and they don't know, nor do they have a sign that says, hey, I'm trans. They're just going through life. So I had no idea what was happening with the trans agenda. I had no idea that they were medically transitioning kids. I knew that there was, something about the bathroom issue. And in all honesty, I don't know how to fix that, because there's so many variants. There have, Steve that's got a 6-inch beard and wants to be called Stu, who's never taken estrogen, that now believes he's a woman. And then you have somebody that has gone through 15 years of hormone therapy, and that, it would be weird for that trans woman. So I never had a fix for it. So I never really got involved with it. But after getting sick from transgender health, after experiencing the over and over, experience the humiliation in the ER, experiencing people laughing at you, experiencing people over and over again, well, we have no idea what's wrong with you. Can't you go back to the person that did this. So basically it's like an abusive relationship, right? You're at home, you've got a husband that beats the shit out of you. And then, you know, you go somewhere and they say, you know what, you really need to go back to that husband that beat the shit out of you. And so you know, the only option I was given was to go back to Dr. Crane. Well, Dr. Crane's the one that did it for me. And that catapulted me into reading on transgender health. And as I started to read, it was kind of one of those jaw-dropping things where it's like, wow, I can't believe that they're doing this to people. They have no long-term studies. I started to notice that transgender women that are on synthetic hormones for a long period of time usually have some kind of bone issues in their 50s on at 25 years. A lot of them end up in the wheelchair. A lot of them have the infections that I have, the reoccurring infections, and none of it has been studied. And so it was a process. It was a process. And I said this in Newsweek. I basically kind of God, the universe, or whatever, if you help me problem solve out of this, because I had a bacteria infection for 17 months. I couldn't think. It was the weirdest thing. It was like I had a problem and it was like a paper bag. I mean, I just couldn't get out of it. But I made a promise that if I was able to get out of this and I was going to be here for my kids, I would tell them the truth. It started out, tell them the truth about the phalloplasty. And then I started to delve deeper and delve deeper. And I got on Twitter and I started to realize what they're doing to kids. Like phalloplasty has a 67% complication rate. We're not talking complication, you know, we're talking loss of genitals. We're talking colostomy bags. We're talking fistulas. We're talking infections, a 67% complication rate. It's one of the most difficult surgeries you can have. It's right up there with brain surgery and heart surgery. But those doctors, those good doctors are not touching it because they know that this is experimental. We're not going to touch this till we figure out how to do it. But then you have doctors that are just shitty doctors. I mean, horrible doctors, not making money, taking out, you know, appendixes, you know, making $200,000 a year. And then all of a sudden they put trans on their door and they've got people walking around the building to come in to do a phalloplasty, writing $257,000 checks from insurance companies. The LGBT protects them. You know, anybody that goes against them, they're bigots. So the more and more and more I delved into it, the more and more and more I realized this is wrong on a cellular level. This is very, very wrong.
So when someone goes in for one of these new sort of experimental procedures, I mean, when you went to Dr. Crane, what was the warning like? What was the, you know, I think they're supposed to tell you these things, right, in advance. Did Dr. Crane tell you about this?
Well, that's, and I'm speaking from what I have read in the case. And now Dr. Crane had 9 medical malpractice cases against him in California. The attorney told me that he was banned from conducting surgery in San Francisco. So he moved to Texas, which is a tort reform state, which in English language means that having those big lawsuits, you know, all these people coming together to sue one person, it doesn't happen. Experimental procedures kind of just get thrown out. So he moved to Texas saying that I'm just, you know, I'm trying to be there for my trans people. Bullshit. You couldn't perform surgery anymore in San Francisco. So the thing with seeing these surgeons is that I probably spent 5 or 10 minutes with Dr. Crane, seriously talking to him. It was so nonchalant. It was like no big deal. Everything that I said was no big deal. Yeah, not a big deal, not a big deal, not a big deal. Yeah, not a big deal, not a big deal. And so you begin to kind of go, well, maybe it isn't a big deal. You know, maybe it isn't a big deal. And then like 2 or 3 days before the surgery. So everything that, you know, is leading up to that, you've gotten the time off from work. You've told everybody you have everything, all the, you know, the things that you need for the surgery, aftercare. He'll send you this video, which it was like a 30-minute video that goes through all the complications. Well, you're already invested and, you know, you've already, your brain has changed from a looker to a buyer. You know, so I was shown that video, but it was just no big deal. And so I ended up turning it on and kept working. And I was halfway listening to it. I'm like, oh yeah, he's just, now, if I would have known he had 9 medical malpractice cases, if I would have known that the phalloplasty was one of the hardest surgeries to conduct, if I would have known that it was experimental, if I would have known that he was banned from surgery in San Francisco, if I would have known that the scum of the earth are the transgender surgeons, the people that everybody else laughs at that can't make it in any type of surgery, if I would have known there was no specialized training that they had to go through, if I had to know any surgeon could get into trans medicine, and trans medicine is the hardest, is some of the hardest surgeries, if I would have known all that, I wouldn't have done it. So it was a process to that time where I kind of made that promise, and I started to feel better. I started to feel better and kind of delve in. And I was talking to Barbara Kay, who's a writer in Canada. She's one of the first people that I talked to. And I remember I was reading about all these kids medically transition. And I said something to her. I said, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And she said, because transgender people like you don't say anything. And unfortunately, society thinks that this is bigotry. And she said that to me. And I remember I went radio silent for about a month. After that, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this.
Wow. So. Now you said if you had known all that information, you wouldn't have done it. Do you feel that way about your transition? I think I've heard you say that you are ultimately happy with your transition.
You know, I'm a pretty honest person. I really do kind of, and I've realized to get anywhere within the situation, you kind of have to peel open your chest. You have to. It can't be something that you're going to kind of do. And that's perfect for my personality. When you say happy, that's a trigger word, right? Happiness is an inside job. Nothing that you can do outside is going to make you happy. So that's a pretty strong word. What I am with being medically transitioned is I've accepted it. There is no such thing as truly detransitioning. Hormones are permanent. They're permanent. So I've got some different things that I can do. I can accept what I've done, which I should have done in the first place, accepted who I was. Well, I do it now. I accept the decision that I made. I accept that medical transition is permanent. I accept that there's positives and negatives with that. If I started to get on the detrans train, which I'm starting to see, it's another fantasy that I'm going to be let down at in 2 years. Because what's going to be in 2 years if I detransition? I'm still going to have electrolysis on my face. My voice is going to sound like a trans woman. I'm going to look like a trans woman. I have to reinvent myself. And in all honesty, me and my family, we've been through enough. So happiness is a strong word. I can say that I'm content. I have accepted who I am. Do I recommend medical transitioning? Hell no. Not to kids, not to adults, not to anyone. But I don't recommend women getting boob jobs either. They should accept what they were born with, right? But if a woman wants to get her breasts done, that should be something that she should be able to do. But what we shouldn't do is make that cosmetic surgery out to be life-saving, because when you put a diagnosis on something, when you make it not a choice, which is what they've done brilliantly with PR, which is you have gender dysphoria, which means it's not your fault. You need a prescription. There is a fix. Don't listen to anybody else. This is the fix. So it's a streamlined service now for hormones, and people have got to tie the dots together. A child that goes into medical transitioning has a lifetime of about over $1 million for pharmaceutical companies, a reoccurring kind of cha-ching. I mean, Netflix is trying to get $12 a month, I mean, that is a business model that every business wants to get in. So I totally lost my train of thought there. That happens a lot.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I wanted to ask you sort of what was the origin story of your transition? What brought you to that originally?
It was a lifetime kind of culmination. Honestly, it was not fitting anywhere. As a kid, I didn't fit in. I was very dominant and very kind of in your face. I mean, at my kindergarten, the first day of kindergarten, the teacher was reading a book, and I raised my hand and said, your inflections are wrong. And I took the book from her and started reading it. I mean, this was, my life. A bull in a china shop. Now, I didn't fit in with the other girls. I didn't fit in with boys. I saw how much easier it would have been if I would have been born a boy. I knew that if that would have happened, I would have been the quintessential male. I know it. I would have been the Johnny quarterback. I would have been the, football quarterback. I mean, I would have had that life, and I knew that, and that was hard to take. And then when I started to come out, I wasn't accepted in the gay community either. And I wasn't accepted into the gay community because I was not a butch lesbian. I was never a butch lesbian. I come from a really feminine family. So I had a feminine flair to me, but I was really strong and dominant. And I remember a little butch told me when I was probably like 19 years old, she was just this little tiny butch. And she said, you know what, you got to pick a side. What side do you want to be on? Do you want to be a feminine lesbian, or do you want to be a butch lesbian? Because you can't be a feminine lesbian and have feminine women. Those are ours, kind of a thing. And so it was a fucked up thing, very young, and it was only one person, but it kind of engraved my path, right? So I never got involved in the gay and lesbian community. And I had come to a point in a relationship that I was in where I was in a relationship with a very, very religious, almost to the point where I think it was a mental illness Catholic woman who was through and through a lesbian, but didn't want to be. And so her family had her go through conversion therapy and all this kind of stuff. And we had broken up and got back together. And it was just like all these things kind of culminating at once. And I was like, you know what, maybe there is something wrong with me. So when I went to therapy, this is a story that I tell because it is quintessential to what is happening right now, which the first therapy session I had, the lady said, well, how long have you been dressing in men's clothes? Now, keep in mind, I was not butch. I had slacks on in business sales. I had a nice silk shirt on. I had earrings, makeup, but not overly done. I did not look or dress like a man, but it made me question to myself, because I remember looking down and then looking up and went, well, hell, I guess I didn't know I was all my life. And so it was one thing after another. I had a surgeon, of course, that was going to make money on me, said to me, have you ever been tested for intersex? And I went, no, why? Well, you have a jawline. And I went, maybe I am. And so it was all these things coming together where it was like, you know what, there is something wrong with me. And I haven't, and this is going to make me fit. This is going to make me fit with my wife. This is going to make me fit with her family. This is going to make me fit with me. This is going to make me fit with society. And so it was one big decision. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So then what was the sort of steps that started to go wrong, I guess? Like, when did things start to take a turn?
You mean in transition?
Yeah, in terms of the medical side of things going on.
The medical side. Well, I started to realize as I transitioned that there's kind of a secret code that men only know about men. And there's a secret code that women only know about women. And so regardless of if you're feminine or masculine, whatever sex that you're raised in, you're conditioned. Whether you know it or not, you do things that you've realized and were taught to you at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I didn't get the gravity of that until I transitioned. There are things that you don't do when you look like a guy. I had no idea, and I kept doing them, And so there was like an uneasiness with it. I started for the first time to jump inside myself. I was in business sales. I was always the one that said, I'll take that account. I got it, just everything. And I found myself in meetings kind of sitting back going, God, I hope they don't talk to me. And so there's an insecurity that happens that we don't talk about that, it happens with trans. You kind of go in this cocoon thing, and then you come out and your confidence is not as good. So you have to figure out how you walk in this world differently. So for me, that was a difficult time. But on the other side of it, this had absolutely fixed everything. All my wife's fault. All the things that was wrong with that. Her family met me as a man. They didn't know that I was her lesbian lover, the one that's like the devil lesbian. They had no clue that Scott was the person that they hated. And so it was kind of like it was a mind fuck, because I had all these people around me that I heard condemning her for years. And then all of a sudden they were right in front of me, and I was watching them with their kids, and I loved them. I mean, I was like, I love these people that I thought were bigots. I mean, I love them. And it was such a hard emotional period of time. But the downhill slide came with the phalloplasty. The phalloplasty was, I call it the candid camera of horror stories. If there was a candid camera of horror stories, it was just one thing after another that just kept going wrong.
Mm-hmm. And then, so it was sort of during this process, or after this time when you started to recover, that you started doing all this reading and looking into it, I think you said. So what was that like? What did it kind of feel like when you started learning everything that was happening and how kids are transitioning and everything?
Ask me another question again. I mean, ask me differently. I didn't understand what you want from me on that.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess I'm just asking, like, when you did start to do all this research and all this reading about what's happening to other people in their transitions, and when you started to learn about kids transitioning, what did that feel like? I mean, what was your sort of first reaction?
Well, it was a process, of course, right? So I had the phalloplasty, and then 7 days after the phalloplasty, I had a pulmonary embolism that induced a stress heart attack. After that, went back to Dr. Crane, said, "Oh, you're wonderful. You're doing so good." Well, I had a ligament sticking through my arm. Real good, Dr. Crane. I was showing signs of infections, and he was, "Oh God, I wish everybody, healed like you do." 2 days later, I was in an ambulance for sepsis. 2 days later, I had somebody come in and say, "That's a ligament sticking through your arm, right?" And I went, "No, Dr. Crane says it's okay." "No, it's not. Can you do the surgery?" I asked. "No, you have to go back to Dr. Crane." So went back to Dr. Crane. Now I've got a deformed arm for life. And then I started to feel a little bit better. And I started to get back to work. But then I started blowing up my body, like 40 pounds of blow up and then blow down. And my wife had left, and I was not able to take care of my children. And so my children had to go with my ex-wife that I was with in a lesbian relationship for 3 years. I lost my job because I couldn't think. I was not okay. I was in so much pain. And it just kept being one thing after another. But during that time, I lost my job. So the only thing I could do was read. And then, that got me kind of on Twitter and looking at kind of what's happening with kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then, once you got on Twitter, what's it been like for you? I mean, you mentioned to me when we spoke earlier before we recorded that, you've gotten a lot of shit from rad femmes, and have you gotten shit from the other side, from the trans activists? What's been that like on Twitter and online?
Yeah, everybody has a home, right? Feminists have a home. Lesbians have a home. Trans people have a home. Women have a home. Men have a home. I have no home. I mean, I get attacked by everybody. But for me, the way I have to look at it is that I couldn't have been molded to be a better person to stand up for this. I've never fit anywhere, so it doesn't fucking bother me. You can hate me, nobody likes me, nobody understands. Cool. I've been like that my whole life. Now can we save kids? So for me, I've never belonged, so it doesn't bother me that I don't belong. So it allows me to see things from an analytical standpoint. And what society doesn't understand is that if nothing changes, If we take the study that was in the UK of the 4,000% increase in kids, claiming to be trans and medically transitioning, if we take that same ratio and we don't change anything that happened during that time period in 10 years, where it grew 4,000%, if we take that and expand that to the Northwest, expand it to Australia and Canada and US, and we take those numbers with populations and kids ratios, and we kind of cover just that area, in 20 years, 23% of the entire population of the world is going to be transgender. That's fucking enormous. You can't tell me that trillion-dollar industry does not have something to do with the fact that all of a sudden the medical community, the Stonewall hasn't said, hey, wait a second, this is money right here, and we can hide behind the LGBT. So I understand why it's happening. What people don't realize is how bad it's going to get. People don't realize that transitioning is a process. And when you start testosterone, you think testosterone is supposed to fix everything. So you're really excited about that. And then you realize a year into it doesn't fix anything, but I have my top surgery. That's going to fix everything. Then you have the top surgery and then that doesn't work. And then you say, I need my bottom surgery. So then you get the bottom surgery. At some point you have to sit back and go, wow, that didn't fix a fucking thing. And now I have all the medical stuff behind me. And so that's why the only long-term study tells us, I believe, that the highest people are in suicidal ideation is 7 to 10 years after medical transition. And so it's kind of like this gradual process of commitment that happens. And these kids that are medically transitioning, and I have said this and people get irritated when I say this, but it is the truth. We are going to have a suicide epidemic that the world has never seen when these kids start to hit 7 to 10 years. It is going to be terrible. And anybody that knows what's happening with radical trans has got to stand up and start screaming. Everybody, because they've got $1 billion industry marketing it.
Now, it reminds me what you're kind of going back to what you're saying before about how there's this idea, like if I get one more surgery, it'll fix this internal problem. And it reminds me of, I mean, I hope this isn't a flippant comparison, but it reminds me of young girls, young women who are trying to achieve a perfect appearance, like in this sort of Kylie Jenner trend where it's like, oh, if I just get my lips done, I'll be happy with myself. But then you're not satisfied. It's like, I have to get my boobs done or my ass or whatever it is. It's this whole series of body modifications that does seem to me to be seeking this, external solution to an internal problem. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, with the teenage girls, and I know you were a part of Abigail Schreier's work on her book, Irreversible Damage. What are, I guess, some of your thoughts just around all these teenage girls transitioning? Well,
we're talking about body dysmorphia, right? We're talking about what's the other illness, mental illness that kind of is outside of reality, right? Which is anorexia, right? So we don't treat anorexics by saying, I mean, instead a therapist nowhere, mom, dad, I want you to take your anorexic daughter and I want you to take her class twice a day about the benefits of starvation and what it can do to benefit her body. Then I want you to stand in front of the mirror and have her say, I'm fat and ugly 100 times a day. There you go. There's your prescription. That's what they're doing with gender dysphoria kids. And that's why this is so big with girls, is because girls tend to go through some kind of body dysmorphia growing up. So what we're telling girls who are outside of reality, they want people to say and refer to them of opposite pronouns. They believe biology is wrong. All these telltale signs of the mental illness, we're sitting back and going, yep, you're right. we need to fix this. And if you talk to transgender people that are not young, that have been transgender for a long time, they still suffer from gender dysphoria. In fact, gender dysphoria gets worse when you medically transition, because now you're focused on it all the time. Now you're reminded about it all the time. Did I do that male enough? Did they think that I was trans? Did I fit in? Was that the right thing to do? Was that not the right thing to do? Oh my God, I just got the wrong pronouns on the phone. So it's just like it's constantly eating on the back, on your back head. Medical transition doesn't fix anything. And I get a lot of shit from radical femmes, from not all of them, but just a couple actually. And I understand what they're saying. They say, you promote medical transition. Well, fucking A, I don't. No, I don't. I don't. I mean, I don't think anybody should get cosmetic surgery. I think we should all accept who we are, but that's not reality. People are going to medically transition. And you know what? The fact is, of all the transgender people I know, and I know quite a few, 18% of them regret. A lot of them regret it 100% in D-trans. One is kind of 50-50 and acceptance, kind of like me. And then you have that one person that went, hey, you know what? Buck Angel is one. This really saved my life. And it did for him. So we can't take that away from him. But what we have to figure out are, who are the other 18? And these people probably should not medically transition. And people need to go into it without it being experimental, with basically a direct correlation. You give this amount of testosterone, this happens. You do this surgery, that happens. Here's the baseline for Kayla. If people get under that baseline, they need to be held responsible. Right now, it's like, fuck it, do whatever you want. That's not bigotry. Sorry, it's not bigotry.
You've been very open about talking about who you were pre-transition, like the power businesswoman that you were, and your life before. And something that I've noticed is that a lot of trans people don't want to talk about it, or actually maybe I should say rather the activists don't want other people to talk about trans people's pasts. And, there's this concept of dead naming. Why do you think that it's like almost a taboo? Like, for example, if we think of, Caitlyn Jenner, like it's not PC to talk about who Bruce was in the past. I guess I wonder, like, what are your thoughts on why that's something of a taboo?
I understand why it's a taboo. I get why it's a taboo. But it's a taboo for mental illness. If you believe something that is not correct, if you believe something that is, outside of the realm of reality, and you have to have that be true, then it's going to offend you if you talk about reality. When Caitlyn Jenner was presented as a male, but that's reality, and that's healthy. I chose to medically transition, and that's what people need to understand is you choose to medically transition. You choose to become transgender. What you do not choose is gender dysphoria. That's a mental illness that is known to be helped tremendously by talk therapy. And now in the United States, 33 states in the United States now have banned that. So you have mental health people that, somebody comes in and says, I'm trans. The only thing the mental health professional can do is, okay, let's call the gender clinic, instead of going, why do you feel that way? Is it because you might be a lesbian and we haven't accepted that fully and completely in society? Could it be that you just haven't fit in, and this is maybe you found a way to fit in with people? Let's go through that process as a child. Let's figure out what the best avenue is. And you can make a decision when, your brain is fully developed, when you understand the consequences. But now in the United States, no right to transition. Why is that? Why is it that everybody wants to jump to medical transition? The correlation to the finances, there was a pharmaceutical head executive said that in public, basically, that transgender health is a reoccurring revenue stream. This is the all-time benefit for any company. That is the business model of our day and age. It is no longer, you buy something, you leave. It is Netflix is trying to get you up on monthly subscriptions. Everybody wants $2 or $3 a day, right? Or $2 or $3 a month. Everybody wants to be able to project their business And, that way they can do the PR and all the business stuff just becomes so sweet that we know that these people have to have us. And that's at 1.3 million per kid that starts to medically transition just for hormones. Really? And on top of it, insurance companies are going, well, it's a diagnosis. We got to cover it. So we have people that are not getting heart surgeries, not getting, kids are not getting everything. We have insurance companies that are flipping the bill for this. So it's cosmetic surgery, insecure people about who they are, that they can't say no to it. So it's an open channel. I mean, it's the perfect financial storm that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people have predicted lawsuits, sort of an avalanche of lawsuits coming. What do you think the opening might be for lawsuits in the future? Would it be the pharmaceutical companies, the surgeons? What are your thoughts around that, around potential for future lawsuits?
Well, here's the problem. Lupron, which is the company that invented the hormone blocker, right? They were sued in 2001 or 2002. Anyways, they were sued and deemed a criminal enterprise for bribery and false advertising. Basically, doing exactly what the fuck they're doing right now, lying, saying everything's, it's no big deal, it's reversible, all that kind of stuff. They wrote a check for $874 million to the US government, deemed a criminal enterprise. Didn't make them blink. They just jumped right back into it. And they're making so much money that there's going to have to be lawsuits that are going to be kind of like the opioid crisis on steroids. And it is going to happen. It is going to happen. All these people that think that, they're living the high life, they should enjoy the high life now, because they're going to lose everything. Because these kids are going to grow up and these parents are going to go, I knew it. And they're going to have people on them. They're going to have mama bears and daddy bears. I mean, this is going to be a nightmare for these people financially.
Mm-hmm. So, Scott, thank you for letting me pick your brain today. I really appreciate it. I wanted to know just what advice might you have for gender critical feminists who are trying to stop this medical transition, but are meeting a lot of challenges, and some of them, as you said, are a bit insular and a bit too maybe extreme in their views. What do you think would be effective to actually move this forward for people? You said you're sort of not in a tribe looking in, so I think that might be a useful perspective.
Let me say that there are only a couple radical feminists, not very many. Most radical feminists have just been incredible. Here's what I say needs to happen. Everybody needs to stop trying to prove their point. Everybody needs to stop right fighting. Everybody needs to stop saying, hey, you know what? I told you that's our thing. The gay community, see, you are transitioning our gay people. And then the feminists are like, see, you are, doing this to our girls. And the Christians are like, see, I told you you're going to go to hell because of this. And so everybody has a win. When everybody takes their wins and shoves them out the fucking door and says, you know what, kids are being mutilated. They're being taken advantage of. And I don't care what your win is. I don't care what your win is. I don't care what your win is. It doesn't matter right now. What matters is that we stop the medical industry from butchering our children. So whatever win that you need to have, find it somewhere else. This is so important. This is not about politics. This is not about getting your name in the paper. This is not about you achieving whatever it is that you need to achieve. This is the fact that these kids are going to start blowing their heads off. So whatever win you need, get it somewhere else, not here. And grab my hand and grab that other person's hand that you hate, and grab that person and grab that person and grab that person. That's the only way we're going to stop this.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to link your organization, TReVoices, that people can find and check out more of your work. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Sasha.